First of all, it's really fun to be back home again. I was born in Riverside and grew up and did most of my pastoral ministry in this area. And I've seen so many good friends. And I think it's a little, I'm going to have fun with this when I get home. It's a little unique that the venue in which we are is the Don and Esther Latour lecture room. And the scars that I bear on my face are all thanks to them, so I'm very close to them. Don wielded the knife and she the needle. And this is how I have all of my scars on my face. They're dermatologists and good friends of mine, and it's fun. Well, the annotation project I started just over 2 years ago. Dr. Roland Karlman worked leading out in the first volume. Here's the title page. I hope some of you have had a chance to pick this up and do some reading in it. The purpose of the annotation project is to take the unpublished letters of Ellen White and present them in an annotated form. This means we have a lot of questions to ask about those and some answers hopefully to find, but it will make us be more able to understand the letters, their time and their place, etc., and also to apply them as necessary. Here's a sample page from the first volume. You see that there, on many pages, there are actually more notes than there are the letter, but rather than inserting them within the letter themselves, we use the superscript and move on down as a footnote. You notice in this one, Dear Brother and Sister Collins. So Dr. Karlman's job was to find out who Brother and Sister Karlman were, find out what the situation was, and write about it. So you have, these are real people. They're just not letters to the air. And hopefully that's, I get to continue that work. I would just share with you a little bit of the process I use just to help you understand how it's being done. First of all, I took each letter in manuscript and I used a lot of highlighting. I did this in Microsoft Word. Different colors for different things, dates, visions, people, places, correspondence, events, issues, definitions, publications, etc. And so in my file drawer then I have all of these letters and manuscripts with all of these underlinings. The next thing I did was working on dating issues. In Ellen White's early writings, the first 20 years of her work, she seldom put a full date on her letters. Many letters have no dates at all, and some of them only have the month. A lot of them only have the month. They say February. Over the years, many people have attempted to date them. We have a nomenclature system that have come up, you know, letters number so-and-so and this date, and some of them are even right. A lot of them are. But they're all educated guesses on those because we have only the month at best on most of these early letters. We just made a correction a few months ago in one because she was writing a letter of consolation to a lady who had lost her husband. And according to the traditional dating, she sent the letter a year before he died. Now, you know, she is a prophet. However, I don't think that would help us in this case. So we have redated that letter. Consequently, there are a lot of letters that have multiple titles or dates and names. You may have what was once letter 3, 1863, is now letter 27, 1861. Some of them have been changed 4 times already over the years as the process has gone. So these are things we have to work with. The relationship of letters to travel, I found this very interesting. Quite typically, not always, always exceptions, but quite typically, Ellen will write a letter to someone within a week or 2 after she was in the town where she saw them. This has helped us immensely with the dating by putting together, recreating Ellen White's itinerary. Now, this is not as easy as you might think, but we have put together as much as we can during these 6 or 4 years that I'm working with right now. Where was Ellen White at any given time? Where she just traveled to? Because if she had just come to Loma Linda, very likely within the next 2 weeks she would be writing letters to people she had seen here. And that helps us to identify the people. By knowing that, it helps us to get the time. Contextual indicators. I just mentioned the man had died. That really helps us date them when we have things like that. And her diaries. Very often in her diaries, she will state something like, yesterday I wrote 3 letters, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 2, and she lists who they were written to. So when we come to a letter written to that person and go to the diary and we have the approximate time and find she wrote them, then that helps us to date them. So that, of course, is of great value. Identifying the individuals is probably one of the largest jobs. And here's the reason why. She uses partial names in almost every circumstance in these early letters. First names only, Dear John. Thank you. Last names only, Dear Sister Smith. About as useful. Or initials only, Dear Brother D. Let's take a look at a couple of those. Dear Brother John. Is it John Loughborough, John Byington, John Day, John Daigneault, John Andrews? Who's it going to be? We have to figure that out. This one was really a fun one. This was written to the Brethren Kellogg's and their wives. Now, the Kellogg's that come to our mind first, of course, are the family of J.P. Kellogg, with John Harvey Kellogg, Will Kellogg, all of these. But you know, this letter was written in 1861. How old was John Harvey Kellogg then? He was still a kid. No, he wasn't married yet, no wife. This wasn't going to do. And so we started looking around. It turned out to be the last one, brothers and sisters Daniel, Joseph, and Milton Sidney Kellogg. Parents and 2 boys and their wives. And I'll share the story a little later of how I finally discovered that. How about this one? Dear Brother and Sister D. And that's a period, even though it looks like an E. Brother and Sister D. Oh my, that leaves it wide open. Well, I was able to find it was Daigneault's, clear at the bottom there. Now, some of the challenges are caused also by phonetic variations. Spelling in the 19th century was not what we do now. We did not have spell check, and people spelled phonetically. And so you will find just the most amazing variety of spelling. I really approve of this myself because I have always known phonics very well and spelling was hard. So lady can be spelled L-A-D-I-E with perfect intelligence. My teacher didn't think so, though. She kept marking me down on it. Anyway, nicknames, transposed elements. Well, look at that. Deliberate plays on a name. Let's take a look at some of those. Here is a spelling issue. Janetta. The feelings of Janetta. Who's Janetta? Well, after a lot of work, I've discovered that this was Frances Jeanette Stevens Farnsworth. Now, of course, if you're speaking Spanish, it could be Janetta, so it could be closer. So it works. Difficult things. Nicknames. One of her best friends, she wrote many letters to, Lucinda Abbey Hall. She calls Cinda. She calls Lucindy, Cindy, all kinds of names. It's a friend. She has all these nicknames. This one I really enjoy. Transpositions. Here she writes, Brother Demerhurst. Boy, did I struggle with that one. I finally found out it was David Damarest. She got the E and the R transposed, and then, of course, E's and A's sound about the same, and an H just got in there for fun. A deliberate play on words. She's written a few letters to a man by the name of Victory Jones. His name isn't Victory, it's Victor Velos Jones. But I'm going to read a little piece of one of those letters. I think it explains the thing, why she used that play on words. Your judgment and reason are convinced that we have the truth, and there's no happiness for you unless you overcome your strong habits. He had trouble with the tobacco, and are purified by obeying the truth. The inconsistencies of some Sabbath keepers have stumbled you. One of them was that the head elder of the church was a little too sweet on his wife. That would stumble me if someone did that. I think that I can, have some sympathy for him. You have felt impatient with them because they didn't always show their faith by their works. But Victory, this should not stumble you. Nothing should hinder you from following the only true, unerring pattern. Jesus pities and loves you, yet there is a living reality in religion, and its sacred influence is sufficient to hold you as an anchor. Dear friend, I saw that you could reform. Your strong foe has bound you, but in the name of Jesus, shake off these shackles and be a free man. Remember the sufferings of Jesus to save you. Look at his sacrifice, and then in his strength make the sacrifice yourself, which will bring you happiness, bring happiness to yourself and your family, and at last win for you the victor's crown. Can you, will you do this? I beg, I plead, I entreat you to heed this merciful message and reform. The greater the struggle and the trial, the greater will be the reward, and the louder you can chant the song of deliverance. I must close. My prayer is that you may be proved worthy of your name, the name she made up. Be an overcomer and walk with Jesus in light, because you will be found worthy, washed and made white in his blood. This story ended sadly. He left his wife, divorced her, joined the Civil War as a soldier, and she married the head elder when his wife died, which she did right about then. There's a lot about that too. That's a big story. How about clues? How do you find out who these people were? Well, first of all, I look on other letters from Ellen White. She often wrote multiple letters to people about the same subject. She'd remind them, remember when I wrote to you before about this? You need to get with it. And sometimes in those other letters, she'll use a more complete name. So by piecing those together, it helps. Secondly, names of family members. It really helps when she mentions the kids' names. And then you can go to the census records and find the family living there with that last name, and the kids are that name, and it helps you. Geographic hints. When I saw you in, those things help. And let me tell you, I have spent hours, countless hours, going through census records for a town that I knew this person was in, reading every entry, trying to find someone who might match it, making a lot of notes. Issues or circumstances mentioned, always a help. Chronological hints. This has really helped in a lot of ways. When I have two brother Smiths, but she says, you are a very aged man. Now that means different things to me at different times. When my father was as old as I am now, I knew he was a very aged man, but things have changed. But those help me also to identify. And incoming correspondence. Now, during the years I'm working, we have very little of this. But I have been able to get some help from this. If Ellen White responds to a letter, and then you can find the letter written to her, who it was from, yes, everything falls together, and that's so helpful. In this first part of the step, then, I try to find the geographical context. Search Ellen G. White writings for the name. Search the review for name and place. Now, there's two ways you can do that in the early years. You can go to the Words of the Pioneers, CD-ROM. This has a much higher accuracy than the OCR on the website of the archives, and it's fast. But it has a problem for the kind of research that I do. It doesn't tell you in the hits list what page in the review it's on. Now you say, what on earth difference does that make? It makes all the difference in the world on a lot of searches. Page 7 is where the letters to the editor are. Page 8 is a subscription list that lists thousands of people, and that's all it is just their list. And it has only their one initial, usually for the first name, so it doesn't help you a lot. So I like to go to when I'm working in the review in these years, to the old archive site. The new one is very beautiful, and it's very clever, but it thinks for you. It's like Microsoft Word. And it thinks it knows what you want, and ranks the hits according to what it thinks you want, which has nothing to do with what I'm doing, because my mind works differently than it. And I do this chronologically. So I go to the old site so I can do it chronologically and use those page numbers. When they're on page 7, I look closely. Search the obituary index. This is on the Center for Adventist Research website. There's lots of links on all the other websites to it. This is really helpful. Now, I have learned that all the information in an obituary is not to be taken at face value. When a person dies, by the time they've lived their long life, and their grandchild writes the obituary, a lot of the facts have gotten morphed. But still, there's a lot of good hints here. I was just reading one the other day when it said, she was baptized by James White in the Battle Creek after some meetings. Well, she was baptized by James White, but she was baptized in Monterey, Michigan, because I have the church records for Monterey, Michigan, and in there it lists the day she was baptized, with whom else she was baptized, and the Whites were visiting there then, and James White baptized them. So you can't take everything at face value, but it does help. The church records are wonderful. And I would say for all of you pastors, please do not allow your church clerk's records to go into oblivion. They're priceless. Thousands and thousands of Adventist church records have been tossed in the dumpster because they're out of date. We don't need them anymore. Please send them here to Ted or somebody, or to Andrews. Let us put them in the vault and keep them. And I will just tell you that we have, in the conferences too, the same thing. I was in the Wisconsin conference doing some research a few weeks ago, and I stopped at the conference office. I know most of the people there, they're my friends, and I stopped in and I said, can I go down in the basement and research in some of your records? They said, absolutely, but you won't find any. I said, what do you mean? Oh, when we moved from Madison out to the academy and built the new conference office, we threw everything out. And sure enough, there wasn't anything before about 1930 in all of their records. It was thrown out. Oh, ouch, this hurts. So we're collecting. We now have many conferences records at Andrews, and they're being scanned right now. Conferences will receive, as churches will, a completely scanned record of them that's readable very well, and they're kept in a safe place. Well, census records. I put just a few of these hints in because some of you want to do some research sometimes. Ancestry.com, my favorite. FamilySearch.org, which is the Mormon site, although both are out of Salt Lake, so it really doesn't matter. The Family Search does a better job of searching the 1870 census. It does a better OCR of it than Ancestry. So when I can't find anything in the 70 census in Ancestry, I look Family Search and often find it. I compare this with my list of possibilities that I've come up with, compare the family members. I go through county histories, many of which are available online now, and I don't have to go to the place. And then I create their entry on a family tree and put all this information in there to start figuring out who these people are. By the time I'm done, I have all kinds of stuff. I've got military records, marriage records, all these things piled up. I know these people. And so when we read what Ellen White is writing to them, they're real people. I really enjoy it. As I work through these, I do a biographical information form, put the people down. I put them onto a spreadsheet, and I know what family tree I have them in because I have more family trees than you could shake a stick at, to use my grandfather's terminology. That letter to the Kellogg's, I share a little bit about that. This had me stymied for days, probably 2 weeks, trying to figure out who these people were. And finally I said, I'm going to go back again to the autograph and see if I can get any hints in there that I couldn't grab before. And I discovered stuck to the back of the autograph were 4 more pages of postscript in which she lists their first names. Yes! Not their wives, unfortunately. I've had some trouble finding them. I do know what their first names were because of the census records, but I haven't been able to get those back farther. And it's an amazing story. It's really sort of humorous. It's letter 11, 1861. Ellen White writes to them, sort of scolding them for being a bad witness for God. Because when they had a regional meeting, in those days, a couple families who lived close, they'd invite all the people from around, James and Ellen White or whoever would come and preach. And they would have, the homes would divide up, and either the women would stay inside and the men in the barn if it wasn't midwinter, or if it was, then they'd have 2 rooms or put a curtain up in the middle of one, and one side would be men, so it'd be dormitory style. These families, these 3 people refused that. They always slept with their wives, and they weren't about not to, and they were going to do it no matter what. And Ellen White just says, this is really childish, why don't you get over it? It was sort of a funny story. This is another one, just an illustration that I had a lot of fun with. Poor Edson. Now here at Loma Linda, you would describe his condition in different words. Poor Edson, he is nothing but skin and bones. I am just going to the store to get a flannel for Edson to wear, for his blood is all gone. I don't know who took it, but it was God. Our prayer is for God to spare his life. We cannot give him up now. Mrs. Purple is tending him. Now, if you have ever searched for purple in the Review and Herald, 90% of the finds are going to be about either the woman on the beast, or it's going to be about something that the high priest wore. And boy, these words are really tough. Who is Mrs. Purple? My first thought is, well, she was another one of the church members, and she was helping the whites out. Happened a lot. But she used the word Mrs., not sister. Who knows who she was? I went through the census records in Battle Creek. No purple showed up because of a mistranscription in the census records. So I went back to the review and I said, I've got to find something, and here's what I found. Word came to the office in the morning of the April 4th, that Sister E.A. Pierce, wife of Brother Henry Pierce of this city, was very sick. She was then under the medical treatment of Miss M.N. Purple, popular in the city in her sphere as a physician, and has shared more patronage from our brethren than any other physician in the city. Got it! And so I did a little research on this lady. Unbelievable. Her fiance died the night before their wedding. And this lady was so distraught by this, she went and decided she was going to become a physician. And she went to medical school. She became either the first or one of the first 2 physicians in Michigan, female. And she began her practice in Battle Creek. And wow, what an interesting, I found a picture of her online. Now, a summary of a biographical work so far. For these 4 years, 1860 to 63, volume 2, 617 persons I found that she's talked about in those letters. 543 of these I've been able to identify to what I have chosen to believe to be a reasonable degree of certainty. That's 88%. I'm really happy with that. And this I didn't have to put in, but I couldn't help. 47% of those 543 I was able to identify are in my own family tree. And this is just an extra bonus for me. Many years ago, an architect, historic architect friend of mine told me, you're studying the Adventist church, it was close enough knit, you will find that everyone married each other's family in those early years. And because my father's mother's family were Millerite Adventists, went through the disappointment and then became Sabbath-keeping Adventists. My mother's family, well, my 10th great-grandfather, grandparents on my mother's side were the very first Sabbath-keeping Christians in the United States in the 1600s, and started the Seventh-day Baptist Church. And in the 1850s and 60s, hundreds of Seventh-day Baptists became Seventh-day Adventists, and they all married each other. I mean, all the Cottrells, the Coons, all these people are all, they're all my family. They're all my cousins. Anyway, that was just for fun. But here are a few changes we've decided to make in Volume 2. First of all, we are going to add the identification of the persons in the published testimonies. We're not going to reprint the published testimonies for those years because you've got those on your shelf. But we are going to identify Brother A, B, C, and D in a footnote so you'll know who they are. Secondly, we are going to note changes in the numbering system. So we are going to have a list. If a letter was once called letter 5, 1863, and changed to letter 27, 1861, we're going to have a way to follow that up. So that if you're reading someone else's doctoral dissertation and they quote that, you'll be able to find it again. So we're going to make some cross-referencing system. We haven't decided just how yet. And we are going to expedite the publishing. And the way we're doing that is I am actually doing the annotations in Adobe InDesign. The process when I'm done and with the readers that are going over it, it will go straight to the press as a finished document and be printed. So it won't take the year that Volume 1 took at the press before it got printed after it got sent, as they designed the book. So that's all done. There is one page out of the Volume 2 that I've already done. Now, how about the future of the project? This year is a big year, 100th anniversary of Ellen White's death on July 16. Also my wedding anniversary. We didn't pick it for that reason. This has the potential of affecting the project of annotation, because once everything is available online at this point, everything that we have is going to be available online. Do people really need these volumes to come out? Well, they're not going to get the annotations online at this point. I mean, they're going to get those from the books, so they won't have the background, but the material will be there, which will satisfy a lot of people. So who knows what will happen at that point? We're still negotiating. I may not have a job, see, but I guess I could retire. Anyway, the scope of the project, how far will it go? At this point, the thinking is we may take it as far as up until the time Ellen White got a typewriter and a secretary. And there's some really logical reasons for doing that, too. One is that the volume of her material at that point becomes crazy. There's a lot of it. In the time before the typewriter, we have calculated that we have about 15, that is 15% of the material that she wrote. That's all. Why? Because she wrote it by hand and put it in an envelope and mailed it. You know, it was gone. She did on some letters write, please return the original to me. I'd like to keep it. How much compliance was with that, I don't know, and it wasn't on all the letters that we have even. So some people turned them back without even having that. I don't know. Another reason, once it gets so much, it's going to, if we did everything she wrote, we're going to have it would probably be 50 to 60 volumes, the size of a Bible commentary. So, you know, this will be a big library. And it'll be done after I probably have, am resting. And of course, the second is funding. What should we do? But another reason we may stop at the typewriter is because when she got secretaries and typewriter, we tended to have more complete salutations with their complete name and a date actually was on it. We have more information, which would help a researcher find these things. So it's less cumbersome. Some issues. Limited numbers of letters and manuscripts extant. I've talked about that. Intended confidentiality. Boy, I tell you, I've really struggled with this. When Ellen White writes a letter and says, please burn this as soon as you read it, don't share it with anyone, but the person didn't comply and kept it, as a historian, I'm delighted, but anyway, what do you do with it? Do you make it public when she says, don't you ever do it? Well, I didn't have to make that decision. The White Estate Board made that decision. I was there. I'm not on the board, but I was an invitee. They decided 3 generations have passed. It's safe to do it now. Just put everything out there, even the stuff she said not to. So that's what's going to happen. I want to just spend a moment with number 3, because I think this has to do with what we've been talking about with inspiration. Request to return the original. Why did she put that there? She says you can make a copy of it, so it wasn't that she was wanting it not to be out there. Some have said, well, that might be an indicator of its inspiration. The letters that she wrote to her kids, you know, hi, the plums are ripe, you know, this sort of a thing, she didn't put that on. Maybe it was because it was sensitive, and she didn't want, you know, it was politically sensitive. I don't know. Those are just issues we have to deal with. Another issue about that is the fact that when she gave, in her last will and testament, when she set up the White Estate, I don't know if you understand this, she did not give all of her letters and manuscripts to the White Estate. Between 30 and 40% of them she didn't give. Arthur White, before he died, just didn't know what they were, maybe it was even Willie, just integrated them all. I'm not even sure we have a list of which ones were and weren't before. Did that play a role? I don't know. But those are issues we have to think about. Published material versus personal testimony. Ellen White once wrote and said to a person who was misusing her writings, if you want to know what I wrote, read what was published, or something to that effect. What do we do with the personal testimonies? How much weight do we put on them? When I was pastoring here several years ago, there was a lady in our church, bless her heart. She was converted in her retirement years. She had been a barmaid all of her life, and she had slept with more people than I can count, and she had done all kinds of weird stuff, and praise the Lord, she found Christ, and it was just wonderful to her. But somewhere or another, she found a letter. It was in one of our morning watch books, and I still don't know quite why it was put there, but I wasn't on the committee, so it doesn't matter. A letter Ellen White wrote to her nephew, Frank Belden, when he was a rebellious teenager. And she used the 2-by-4 method, you know, hit them over the head, wake them up, and then maybe you can talk to them. And she says there, and I would not ever take this as a theological statement, she says, if you ever get to heaven, you'll be so far behind everyone else, you'll never catch up. Now, I don't know what that means. Jean, you know what that means? You're a mother. Man, if I'm in heaven and given the job cleaning the toilets, I'll be praising the Lord and singing the doxology the whole time. You know, I don't know about what this all means about catching up. She read that and she said, if a teenager had only a slim chance of making it. If he did, he would be behind everyone else and never catch up. What about a lady who's ruined her entire life? And she got so discouraged, she almost quit. God. I don't know why the devil made her Xerox that page and put it in her Bible. And she brought it to church. And at potluck, she showed it to me, and I tried to explain. It didn't happen. Finally, the third time she showed me that letter, she was so discouraged. We were sitting at potluck. I know right where we were sitting. I reached over and I said, "May I see it?" And she said, "Yes," and I took it. And in front of her and everyone else at the table, I began to shred it. I was a human paper shredder, tiny little cross cuts, everything. Just cut it completely up, as tiny as I could tear it. And she says, "You're tearing up the Word of God." I says, "Yes, I am, lady, but you're reading someone else's mail." We are sometimes in danger, often in danger, of trying to apply something to ourselves or to others that doesn't apply. And we have to be cautious with that. And the extent of act. Now, I just want to read you a few considerations here. These are from the pen of Ellen White. The testimonies are to be given before, this is from her diary, by the way. The testimonies are to be given before parties who will not make a wrong use of them. So you could redo that sentence and make it positive. We must have wisdom to know what to withhold and what should be imparted, and how to make known the light that is given. Some things are presented to guide us in the moves that we make to carry out the purposes of the Lord. Other things must wait till circumstances arise that would make the instruction more impressive. Nothing is ignored, nothing is cast aside, but time and place must be considered. Now, she's talking here more, not so much about the time and place when it was written, but the time and place when it's applied in this context. Nothing must be done untimely. Some matters must be withheld because the persons would make an improper use of the light given. Every jot and tittle is essential and must appear in an opportune time. The messages that I receive are not all made public to all people. Sometimes they are found to be appropriate to be given in some council meeting at the right time and place. So in 1906 in her diary. And then she enlarges a little bit in a manuscript a couple years later. Regarding the testimonies, nothing is ignored, nothing is cast aside. But time and place must be considered. Nothing must be done untimely. Some matters must be withheld because some persons would make an improper use of the light given. Every jot and tittle is essential and must appear at an opportune time. In the past, testimonies were carefully prepared before they were sent out for publications, and all matter is still carefully studied after the first writing. And please understand, what is being put online, July 16, 2015, is not the autographs. There's not a picture of the autographs, not an image of the autographs. What is being put up is the grammatically corrected letters. And many people have worked on this over the years. But that's what's going to be put up there. People ask me all the time in my work, have you found where there's been big mistakes and things like this? Yeah, I found a lot of spelling errors. And no, I haven't found. Another thing they ask me, have you found any new light? No, I haven't. I can see plainly that should everyone who, this is an important quote, listen, I can see plainly that should everyone who thinks he is qualified to write books follow his imagination and have his productions published, insisting that they be recommended by our publishing houses, there would be plenty of tares sown broadcast in our world. Many from among our own people are writing to me, asking with earnest determination the privilege of using my writings to give force to certain subjects that they may wish to present to the people in such a way as to leave a deep impression upon them. But this is present truth, brother. It is true that there is a reason why some of their matter should be presented, but I would not venture to give my approval in using the testimonies in this way, or to sanction the placing of matter which is good in itself in the way in which they propose. The persons who make these propositions, for aught I know, may be able to conduct the enterprise of which they write in a wise manner. But nevertheless, I dare not give the least license for using my writings in the manner in which they propose. In taking account of such an enterprise, there are many things that must come into consideration. For in using the testimonies to bolster up some subject which may impress the mind of the author, the extracts may give a different impression and I think she was very generous in using the word may there, may give a different impression than that which they would were they read in their original connection. It's another word for context. Important stuff. Share just one thing with you before I let you eat. I have learned something in these last year and a half, 2.5 years of working on this. And it's a pastoral lesson that I learned. The hardest letters that Ellen White wrote, the ones that would make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. And I've read some to pastors that if I received it when I had been pastoring, I don't know what I would have done, whether I would have become a garbage collector or committed suicide. I mean, sometimes they're so strong, it's just terrifying. Those hard letters were received, processed by the people to whom they were sent. Sometimes it took 3 to 4 years to process it. It's not a brush job. And those people became her closest associates, her best friends, her co-laborers in the gospel, and in some cases, even her employees, who she entrusted with the job of caring for her writings. The people to whom she wrote, "Dear John, don't get discouraged. Don't give up. Everything's going to be okay. Just submit yourself to it. Please, please, God's waiting for you. You're going to come." And all the nice things that you and I like to say to people as pastors are the Moses Halls, the D.M. Canwrights, the people who walked away. Now, there are exceptions. But I found in most cases that, and I was wondering in my head, why is this? And suddenly it hit me. Those whom I love, I rebuke. And then her exposition in the book Desire of Ages on Judas is astounding. Jesus never openly rebuked Judas. Peter, wow. Satan, imagine being called Satan. I mean, of all the names, I've been called a lot of names, but not that one. I wouldn't like it. He didn't ever rebuke Judas openly, ever. Why? He knew what was going to happen. He knew ahead of time. And he didn't want to give him one word that he could take as a discouragement that would keep him from possibly coming back. What an interesting thing. Well, anyway, those are things that I have enjoyed, and hope maybe they got a few thoughts going in your head.
Thank you, Stan. That was fascinating. Just before we go to the questions, and I will give you an opportunity to get 2 questions, and then you smell the food we're going to eat, okay?
Yeah.
But this is the first volume that came out just at the end of last year. So I don't know, is the second going to be looking like the same?
It looks exactly like it says.
But
volume
that
2.
is a very helpful book information. If you want to have it, it's available at ABC bookstores. And you have some articles in the beginning that deal with some controversial subjects, and of course the letters and manuscripts with the explanation, as Stan said. So,
and that covers 1845, the first known letter that we have, through 1859.
Yes. So,
and I'm working 1860 through 63 will be volume 2.
But the first one, it's available, and I thought that it's information that you need to know. All right. Sorry? The title is The Ellen G. White Letters and Manuscripts with Annotations. Okay? And if you want to look it, I will leave it there on my desk. Okay, question or 2, and then we're going to eat. Oh, how much is the price? I got it for free, but it says $44.99.
That's the list price, but there are always sales. Yeah. And there's Amazon.
Yeah. So I checked the price. So, okay, questions? All right, 1 question here, and then we're gonna eat.
Now, it seems the letters that you're showing portions of were handwritten by Ellen White.
Correct.
Were some letters ever written by secretaries or others?
Ellen White did the handwritten. We have a few cases in her later life of her dictating things, and someone taking it down in shorthand. But that's later. What she wrote, she wrote. Now, some of her sermons were taken down in shorthand. And certainly when she had the typewriter, people copied them. Even some of the handwritten letters we have are not autographs. Some of them are copied. There's one letter I found in the years I was working that we have 4 copies of. And one of them is her own handwriting, and the other 4 are people who copied them. One is John Loughborough, and another one's Jan Andrews, I think, and somebody else copied them down also. And they've ended up in our collection somewhere or another. But she did, in those early years in which I'm working now, she wrote by hand the letters and mailed them. And often a lot of them. James White would write in the review, my wife in the last 6 weeks has written 400 pages of personal testimony. And then I look in the file and we have 30 pages. You know, and it's by those things and other things she mentions in the letters that we've come to the approximation that we have about 15% in those pre-typewriter years of what she wrote.
Yes. There's a story of Ellen G. White of her preaching with this huge Bible. I have been hearing different stories about that as not being true. Is that something that is accurate, or this is just something that is not?
Okay. Yes, I will speak to that. Number one, it wasn't preaching with it. It wasn't preaching. These stories, I find that many of these spectacular stories change in place and time so many times. Wherever I am in the world, I discover that the people it happened close to them somewhere, and you know, it may have happened, you know, not at Loma Linda, it was in Battle Creek, or if you're in Battle Creek, it happened out here, you know, whatever. But there are 4 different references to her holding up a Bible in vision. In one case, it was small Bibles. Pocket Bibles, in which she picked up a lot, and she would open one to a text and hand it to one person that was in the room, and another one to another one, and another one to another one. That happened in Topsom, Maine. There are 3 accounts of a large family Bible being held up by Ellen White. Now, I am a historian, and I put a lot of stock in the amount of time that passed between when something happened and when it was recorded. And to me, this makes a lot of information as to whether I take the story at face value or whether I do some more research. In 2 of the 3 remaining cases, 2 of the large Bible cases, we have letters written by third parties that were there, letters that they wrote within the next week describing the event. That says to me there's a pretty good chance that it actually happened. If the person, when they were 90 years old, wrote, when I was 12 years old, I watched Ellen White do this, I'd say, well, you know, maybe not, you know. But in 2 cases, the other 2, I can't, you know, we don't have that kind of information, but in 2 cases, we have letters from people who were there and saw it happen, writing to someone else about something else, but recorded that as a detail of something that happened to them, that they saw that happen, which says to me, I think I can take that as reasonably reliable. 2 different ones, different places, different years, but all in the very early years of her ministry. Most of the supernatural manifestations happened early on, I think maybe to help people who were struggling with this, processing in their own mind, was this really of God, or is it something this person's making up, to give them something to work with. Yes, but her granddaughter didn't see it happen. Yeah. I loved her granddaughter, and yes, she told many wonderful stories, and a lot of them were true. You know, but I tell stories that happened about me when I was young that I am sure are true, and my mother says it didn't happen that way, but it was a way that it happened in my mind, you know, so, you know, things happen.